Hello, everyone. Hi, good afternoon. That's what it is right now at this point. As we are meeting together here for a Zubaan panel discussion on poster women, and this is a part of the Ananke Literature Festival 2026. And as many of you know, that Zubaan, is a pioneer associated with feminist publishing in India. And Poster Women is a project that was conceived by Zubaan in 2006. So this is the 20th year. We are actually celebrating the 20th year in 2026. And this entails the visual mapping of the women's movement in India. When it was started in 2006, nearly 200 groups and individuals collaborated, came together, and brought about 1,500 posters together, and which spans the history and the journey of about 35 years, capturing the rich, complex, layered narrative of the women's movement. But what is most interesting about this archive is how it has, kept growing, kept evolving over these 20 years, and the kind of engagement that it has had received and is still receiving. And it continues to grow, and, marking its, as I said, marking its 20th year, and bringing so many people together into its folds, which I think is what we are going to also take a moment to celebrate today. And we have the panelists with us. We have Manjima Bhattacharya, Aanchal, Seema, Khulbe, and Rini Tarafder joining us from Mumbai, Delhi, and Shantiniketan, across India. And we are going to spend some time talking about the journey of the Poster Women Archive, how this project became the living, moving archive. And these are three women who have, who have seen the poster women journey in various stages of its, evolving. They have been associated with it. They have seen it at various points in time. And that is what we are going to listen into, while we are having a chat today. So I think we can go one by one. I will introduce the panelists one by one, and you please add in what you want to add in about you, and we can come to some points about the discussion. So if we can start with Manjima, Manjima is a feminist researcher, writer, and activist, based in Mumbai, and she has been associated with the women's movement for over 2 decades now. I think it's going to be more than that in many years. And we are really going to tap into her interesting stories and, ask her to share some of those experiences and how she has seen the Poster Women project and space evolve. Her specialization includes gender and sexuality, labor, and the body. So, Manjima, if I can come to you, about your experience about the Poster Women Archive and how it has grown over the years, what, according to you, has this visual documentation of the women's movement been like? What has this space been like, and how has it continued to evolve over these years? And what has been your experience of being associated with it? And your thoughts on the importance and challenges of archiving of the women's movement, the big space that it is. What has been that? If we can tap into your thoughts on that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I think sorry, just getting started in the morning. I think the first thing that comes to mind is really how important cultural production has been for the women's movement, not just in India, but I think across South Asia. So the role of plays, the role of songs, the role of street theater have all been so much a part of protest, forms of protest and ways of expressing ourselves, So I think, to locate the Poster Women exhibition really and the archive in that history, I think is important. And posters, of course, was another sort of form of cultural production that women's groups that were coming up in the 80s in India were very fond of. Because, I mean, for various reasons. Firstly, there was the aspect that it really spoke to less literate audiences. It had mass appeal, and that was the audience that they were trying to speak to. And so this was, and it was also like a response to things that might have been happening. So whether it was dowry deaths or it was sexual assault, these issues were like the response to these issues. A lot of it, they came in various forms, but often it was posters that was a very strong and powerful way of expressing a response to this. Or if it was not a response, maybe say a provocation. So, when people would talk about मेरी बीवी काम नहीं करती or my wife doesn't work, and really then bringing out the different kinds of unpaid work that women do. So putting those kind of posters out was a provocation to actually start having a dialogue on these things. So I mean, but for me, I think the most important thing that I've seen emerge as I see the posters now and the way it, is that what was happening was that the story is that it is the evolution of the women's movement and the issues that you can see through the posters. You see a narrative of how the women's movement is expanding and recognizing different issues. But I think it's also learning to articulate an Indian feminism or a South Asian feminism later. Like, what is our feminism? Because at the time, it was feminism was seen to be a Western word. It was like, what is the Indian? You're just copying things from the West. There's no real Indian feminism. But this began to actually create that language, just not just uh, spoken vocabulary. So even finding, like, even saying the word for feminism is Narivadi in Hindi. But even to locate that word, to actually articulate it, to mainstream it, was a process in itself. And so poster women also shows us the visual sort of vocabulary that developed over time. So I think in the earlier days, I mean, it was a lot. When it started, I know that, Zubaan went to different organizations and across the country, not just Delhi, Bombay cities, but really tried to cover a lot of languages and places and ask organizations to give the posters that they had made or that they had in their archives. Because a lot of these women's groups were what was then known as documentation centers. And their mandate was actually to document the women's movement. And so they would house these posters, not always in a good condition. There was not much thinking about who owns a poster, who owns, like, who it was difficult to even find provenance of, I think, many of the posters, as in, who made it, where is it from, which year was it made in. So we're not good at those things. Um, but I think it was a remarkable effort at the time to actually pull things together. And the exhibitions at the time were really just, like looking at them in a room, kind of. And I don't know if we want to show any of the.
Yeah, I think if we can see some of those posters, while we were discussing, we were talking about it. Uh, can can we look at that?
So, for example, there is the whole. When I say what distinguishes our feminism from the West, one of the things that when I look back, I see so many representations of the 10-handed goddess in the posters. And, just really critiquing this or this idea that, women are goddesses in India versus the reality of what is actually happening, what the violence that they face, what was happening on the ground. So using those images was really, yeah.
I think it's just so amazing to be able to see. I think it's slide 2.
Do you want me to move to the next slide?
Yes.
Maybe slide 2. Yeah.
And I don't think it's in the slideshow format, is it?
Uh, this is slide 2.
Is it in the slideshow format? एक बार will you check, Aanchal? So the full screen can come.
Sorry. Do you want me to look at the slides?
The slideshow option. If we can put it on slideshow.
Oh, I had put it on slideshow. Was it not showing a slideshow?
No, no,
Oh,
no.
it wasn't showing.
Okay, so then I think the slideshow may not be shared.
Acha. So then we can maybe stop at poster 2. I mean
Yeah,
slide.
yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of posters that you have the Meri Biwi Kaam Nahi Karti right in the middle, but many iterations of that across India. I mean, we have so many posters on this theme of unpaid labor and the work that women from different, you can see there are different sort of um, kinds of clothing that show different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds that women are from. So I mean, this was one. I think the other thing you asked, Manjima, was did you ask about the challenges of it as well?
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
something yeah.
something like even the thought of documenting, archiving something like the women's movement, I mean the importance that you think and the challenges. I'm sure there are
Yeah.
several. So if you would like to share some of it.
I think, I mean, the importance, it's not just Zuban went and collected the posters, right? It's actually contextualizing it and pointing out why was it significant? Why was this a poster at a certain point in time, say against religious fundamentalism? When did it emerge? What was the context that made someone create that poster and what was it responding to? So really curating, contextualizing and framing and creating the narrative, around that was very important. I mean, that is because archiving is essentially it's an approach. It's an approach of like, sort of making sense of different things that happen. And I think that lens that Zuban brought to these posters was very critical. In terms of challenges, I think I'll stick to maybe three. I think archives are always awkward because later on you look back and you think they really show up what's missing. And you realize that, oh, there's nothing from Kashmir, there's nothing from the Northeast. You start realizing what all is missing. You realize that who's speaking. You realize this is a really dominant standpoint. So the goddess in itself, it's a Hindu iconography. It's not secular in that sense. So it's not secular. So it really shows up a very dominant standpoint and the third, I think you only see the commonality. So you see the common messages and themes that emerge. You don't see the nuance. You don't see the dissent. So it's in that sense, it's an incomplete history of the women's movement. And so to complement that, and I think Poster Women did that, and I would actually suggest everyone visit the Poster Women archives online because you have these oral histories as well, which really complement these visual documentations. And through that, you sort of realize, oh, there are multiple standpoints. The same event, say a national conference, is described so differently by five people, and because of the standpoint that they occupy. And so, and you realize, okay, there was dissent about this. There was a lot of conversation about this. There were fights about this. So I think those are the sort of challenges of claiming to be representative of the women's movement and the sort of the practical uh, aspects of it as well. So I think I'll stop there. Or,
I think thank you so much for, bringing in those points because um, I think one of the main things is what I think you've highlighted that, how it is something that is, in process. I mean, it is the more one gets into it, the more one realizes uh, how many more stories there are that needs to show up here, that could have come in, and where are they? I think, the question that keeps coming up with any process of archiving. And I think which is why I would believe, something like this is, not something that's done and dusted. It is something that keeps growing. And I mean, we will, when we come to Aanchal and Rini, they're also going to share more on how, the contexts have evolved today. What are the themes? What are the stories? What are the issues which get added onto the space, and how much more still remains? How much more remains to be done? I think that is one of the main things that every point throws up. Um, but coming back to this, Manjima, since you've been a part of the, Poster Women, archive, and then, how it has traveled, through exhibitions, through various spaces, you've seen that before, and you were also there, at our most recent exhibition in Shantiniketan. So, it would be lovely to hear your thoughts on, the way you've seen this change. What are the things that are coming in, what are the things that you still feel need to come in, and what your thoughts have been on the Poster Women exhibition space, where other people coming and interacting with it, then and now. If you would like to share a few thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the next slide, Anchal, if you could just go to 3, that was what the exhibitions before were very like simple, one would say, to look at. I think this time when I went, I was really amazed at how expansive it was, the interactive nature. I think now I feel like the Poster Women archives really have become a method for public engagement in a very intentional way. I really appreciate that. I think seeing it as a pedagogical sort of an educational tool um, has been very illuminating for me to understand that, how things that were produced through protest can actually become a lesson in history. Um, the inclusion of different forms has been very like beyond print to embroidery cloth or has was actually something that was just stunning to see. I felt that the conversation was also quite different from earlier times. Like in this particular exhibition, I really felt the conversation about moving from the informal ways that we collect archiving to a more formalized approach to archiving, to really questions of ownership and custody. I think previously, there was not much, I mean, everybody had sort of a shared ownership of things. Now, with groups working very differently and separately on specific issues, that kind of ownership becomes an issue. I think regulation around, uh, you know, objects, like even newspaper clippings, for example. At the time, groups used to cut out newspaper clippings and keep it, and, you could access it freely. But now it could be an infringement if that same clipping is posted online by a newspaper and you have to pay to access it. Then, are you in violation of something? So I think these conversations are really new for me, and uh, they've and the Poster Women platform has actually become a space to explore these questions of custody and ownership. So, yeah, that would be.
Thank you for that. I think, we'd hear more from Aanchal and Rini on, the how, I mean, the context and the problematization of, many of these smaller things, which actually we tend to be able to understand once they are coming up. So thank you for that. But before, I mean, moving on to the next speaker, I have one last thing to ask of you, Manjima, that since, you've at that point, if there is any, we were really wanting to hear of any poster that you have been, a part of putting together. So we were really, really looking forward to that story. So we've pulled this one point in. So if you could share a story.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's the next slide, slide 4. Yeah, I see that. So this is one of my posts. This was a poster by myself and Neelam. We were working with an organization called Jagori, and so there was a history of these poster making workshops that used to happen. to actually have young activists try their hand at screen printing and things like that. They were organized by, it was called the Skills Initiative, and they were organized by Chandralekha, who's a dancer and artist, and Sadanand Menon, a journalist and curator. And so this was made as part of that. I think I came across it in the Poster Women archives, and I realized that, oh, this is Neelam and my poster, and but it was credited to Chandralekha. And so, I contacted Zubaan, and then they went through a process of checking provenance, and it emerged that yes, it was indeed created by us during that workshop. But I think the interesting thing about this one, and this is like you can see it's on a newspaper. It looks intentional. It's not. It's one of the rough prints that we had taken out before doing the final print. The final print is lost, but this remains. And I think for me, the real story, what I learned from this, not victim, survivor, when we started making the poster, we wrote a lot about, we were very angry and we wrote a lot of text on the poster. And Sadaran said, no, that's not how you do it. You have to keep you have to keep chipping away the text. What are the key words? What's the key message you want to say? So I think just reducing a whole sentence to keywords, distilling the essence. It was like you have to sharpen the spear of an arrow kind of a thing so that it has an impact. So I think these kind of lessons, even for activists, became for me very significant and important in how you communicate messages to people you're speaking with. So yeah, that's one of my posters. That is one of my Neelam's poster. That is again an important turn in at that moment, because the vocabulary around victims of violence was actually changing to survivor at the time. So it marks that turn as well.
Thank you so much, Manjima, for that, because I think all of us are also thinking, while you're saying, sharing this story of, what the poster making space is also like today, and where the connect still remains. A recent poster making workshop also held along with this, exhibition on the poster women at, Shantiniketan. Newer call for posters that Aanchal has handled, and how, posters are still coming in. And while there's so much shift in certain, certain stories, certain newer issues, there's so much that, still boggles and still really troubles, I think. And the political message in a poster, that, one needs to think of. I think that is a thing that even at the recent poster making workshop, we were all talking about. And the facilitator kept, telling everybody that it's the message that you need to get across through a poster. That is most important. And the rest of it really can wait. Thank you. If we can, quickly move on to you, Aanchal, on connecting on this note. Aanchal Seema Khulbe, just for all of you. Aanchal Seema Khulbe is a queer activist, queer feminist researcher, activist, and artist, and she works with Zubaan. She's deeply committed to advancing justice for women and queer communities, and her work sits at the interesting intersection of queer politics, restorative justice, law, film studies, and material memories. So I think it's a very, very, very interesting to have your thoughts on these, Aanchal. So to contextualize the what we were right now talking about, the posters. I mean, you have been handling the Poster Women Archive, managing it in many ways, currently. So, and you deal firsthand with all these posters and all the material. So how have your workings so closely with the Poster Women Archive, been like in light of how you have seen it get revived in the recent times? Because, through newer collaborations with organizations that, have come together, sharing spaces for holding the Poster Women Archive exhibitions again. So, what has your understanding been of how the engagement is evolving, changing through these newer projects, the call for posters, younger generations who are engaging with this space? So many of them, so enthusiastic about it, about reading into the history, and the several other levels of engagement that you are witnessing. And what is your idea of this archive that has expanded, is expanding, traveling, and grown so much? So, what is the feeling and what are the thoughts that run through your mind?
Okay, thank you, Manjima. Firstly, it gives me so much joy when someone talks about how the archive is expanding. Of course, I have only stepped into the process very recently, and I am learning so much from, Manjima Bhattacharjya and Urvashi and so many other people. And it's always wonderful to hear someone talk about the history of poster women. So I'm just going to take that conversation forward. Today, the archive is 1,200 plus posters, sourced from 160 plus organizations, collectives, individuals, etc. Back in 2006. And like Manjima said, that we also had recent additions to it, which I'll go on and talk about. But it's something that I like to call a living archive because, you know, we did try to archive it, but we are also trying to have so much engagement with the archive now, and so much back and forth with a lot of programming around it, for example through a theater production or walkthroughs or panel discussions, etc., that there is a lot of new ideas and information that is also coming always as we speak. And so it's not just a process that has stopped. It's a process of history making, of history telling, of storytelling, of remembering that continues. So that is, I mean, when you ask me how do you look at the archive, that's how I look at the archive, that it's always evolving. And when I say that the archive is evolving, it's also because the women's movement along it has also been evolving, right? So like Manjuma said that there was a terminology of victim once, but then learnings were made and that moved into something like survivor. And I always like to talk about this one terminology that has changed, which is we used to talk about, we used to use the term female feticide, but learnings are made and now we have moved to terms like sex selection, etc. And that is because the movement itself has evolved, and when the movement evolves, so does your art. um, a lot of posters that have come out in the recent years have been, I mean, a very striking thing about it is that a lot of posters are about, similar issues that were talked about before, like gender-based violence and harassment, etc. But, the forms of this, this has changed. So, how patriarchy and impunity also evolves, right? So, uh, stalking is still being talked about, but it's also digital stalking that's being talked about. Surveillance is being talked about. And I think last year we realized that there are several gaps and we need to, plug in those gaps. So, gaps around movements which only took flight recently, even though these movements have had roots in the Indian subcontinent for long. For example, movements on queerness, movements on disability, etc. And last year we commissioned a call for posters, and after that 23 new posters were added, where we saw all of these newer forms of the same deep-rooted structural violence that we saw back in the 70s and the 80s. So I mean, that is both heartbreaking and quite interesting because I mean, you think of what happens to progressivism at all when, when you're seeing the same issues over and over again. But then the other thing also is that art and artists are evolving too. And, we are also catching on to different forms of, history telling, storytelling, archiving, and, just telling what we want to, showing and, illustrating what we want to. So, when I look at the posters, I don't just think of them as, visual pieces or individual pieces, but I think of them as pieces of historical evidence. If you think about it, these are political documents. These are sourced from very important moments in history, and they are preserved as such. Not just the poster or the individual, visual piece itself, but the story along with it is how you archive the history. And, like Manjima said, sometimes we get it wrong. And it's also because like that's what I think of it as, that we try to grab onto whatever we can find. And the process of archiving is such that sometimes there will be gaps, sometimes things will be left. For example, how many hands went into making of individual posters, or not just making, preserving it, archiving it. Maybe we will not always be able to have stories of all of those people, but we have that in mind, that there is so much more that has gone to the history of each individual poster that we will not be able to encapsulate, but it still exists. The labor that has gone behind it still exists. So, when you talk about evolution, it has just been a great journey for me to look at that's my job, to look at that evolution also, because I have been part of several exhibitions now that we have had on poster women. And like I said before, it's not just putting those visual pieces out, but it's the stories along with that. It's the, be it a performance, be it a panel discussion, be it a walkthrough, be it a film screening that we have along with that. We just talk to the people who helped in the archiving of these posters, who were there when these movements were happening, what these movements meant, how these were connected. It's so interesting that sometimes we find the same poster in black and white from a different state, and that in colored from a different state, because we understand that these movements were also interacting, and these movements were not happening in silos. So, and that's always the nature of the women's movement, right? Like Manjima also said, even the idea of ownership has changed. uh, so yeah. And now when we have these exhibitions, and like you said, we had a poster making workshop. So we had one in Bangalore, and then we had one in Shantiniketan, and so all of these new posters are also added to our collection. And it's so interesting to see like young people engaging with the poster women archive, and it resonating, the archive resonating with them in the same way that it might have resonated 40 years back, because they are looking at it and they are telling their own stories. They're looking at it and saying that, we also relate with this, we also feel this, and they're adding to it through their own posters. So I think there can be nothing more amazing than this. Rini had also once said that there was, a classroom in in Shantiniketan whose assignment was to come and look at our posters. And I would like to join that with what Manjima said. It's also a pedagogical tool now. It's also a way of history telling. So I mean, I feel like, you know in a very small way, what we're trying to do is sort of preserve that history, archive that history, and also saying that, sometimes visual mediums are a very powerful tool of shaping public memory, and it shapes public memory in a very different way than how text shapes public memory. So yeah, that is yeah.
Thank you, Aanchal. I mean, thank you for that very, very insightful, all sharing your thoughts. And what one hears from what you're sharing is how this space offers, one to newer people engaging with it, to hold their own expressions, derive inspiration from, look at it as research, and, go back in time and look at the history. So, how beautifully, uh, the history also keeps coming alive through each bit of it, while newer bits also get added to it. I think that's beautiful to hear from what you were sharing. And I'm going to ask a very simple question, because since you look at this so deeply on a personal note, what does this space, this archive have to offer to you?
Okay. On a personal level, I think I have been very connected to the archive, and I think of myself as a feminist who has entered this movement at the top of, or and after a lot of work being done, and a lot of people who have brought us here, who have brought me here, right, and who have brought the movement here. So I always say that any work that I do, I'm standing at the top of a huge mountain, made up of this work, this feminist work. And any work that I do, my only hope is that I'll be able to add just one speck to that mountain. And you really, when you look at the archive, you really get the idea of how huge and amazing and momentous this mountain is, right? And you literally sit on it, because you look at that archive and you understand through visual mediums. And we are now also trying to expand to photographs, etc. So a lot of visual ephemera. So you try to look through visual ephemera, how, what has brought you here, what has brought the movement here, the things that probably I take for granted today, or things that are common. What has been the history behind it, what has been the evolution behind it. And so it's also a form of like understanding your place in the movement, and also a form of like sort of like a promise that I will take it forward too, and then there will be more hands that will take it forward. So, and that is also how I see the women's movement in general, and that is also how I see engaging with this archive. So yeah.
That's beautiful, Aanchal. Thank you so much for that. I'll just come back to you and Manjima in a bit on some other notes. Let's listen to Rini now. Rini has been uh, associated with the Poster Women Archive more recently. She is working with Artshila Shantiniketan, and Rini is a playwright, a researcher of theater and performance studies, and she's a sewing enthusiast. So, stories all over for her to look into. She holds a PhD in interdisciplinary theater studies. And Rini, coming to you, uh, we were talking about the several stages of the exhibitions. Some that Manjima talked about, some recent ones that Aanchal talked about. And you have been a part of the most recent Post Women exhibition, which there are more chapters to it that are still unfolding in other cities. But this was at Shantiniketan, where you have seen the entire exhibition come together and hold people's attention for about 3 months. So your observation of this space, and the various kinds of people who have come, who have engaged with the exhibition. Some have been, a part of the original Poster Women project. They've said, they've come, they've worked on posters, they have been a part of the original project being put together. And you've seen newer people, newer, researchers, enthusiasts, and what Aanchal said, somebody coming to, look at it as a part of a study. Where it becomes a pedagogical tool, and where children are coming and spending hours, and you've mentioned there are people who kept coming back. So what do you think, something like this, why is an interactive space like this becoming so important, and what is it offering to all these people? So what has been your thoughts on that, if we could hear that?
Thank you so much, Manjima. It's great being here, and great listening to Manjima and both Manjimas and Aanchal speak. Aanchal, if you could share the slides, that would be great. A part of the Poster Women exhibition was presented at Artshila Shantiniketan in the exhibition Zubaan, The Past is Before Us, from March 6th to May 17th to 2026. And this is the poster for the recent exhibition. Next slide, Aanchal, please. So the Poster Women exhibition at Archila Shantiniketan was spread across 3 galleries, and it spilled out into the intermediary spaces connecting the 3. Next slide, please. Different kinds of visitors engaged with the exhibition in different ways. There were students who paid attention to every detail that was laid out before them. There were people who came to click pictures of themselves with the poster and the display. Next slide, please. Those who visited by themselves first and then they returned with their friends, academics, intellectuals, feminists who had heard of the exhibition. There were artists who visited their own work in the exhibition, and they brought their friends. There were tourists and also like a regular visitors from Shantiniketan. So we had varied kinds of visitors who engaged with it in many different ways. So while some visitors came to engage with the aesthetics of the space. Achal, next slide, please. Others spent hours reading every detail, every caption, and every document that was presented. Sometimes I saw someone go in and then they were not coming out for like a lot of time. So then I went and checked and they were like really into this, reading every caption that was present, every document that was there. So a lot of people went into a lot of detail. But there were others who like casually glanced at the exhibit and they left hurriedly, either disinterested in or triggered by what they saw. Achal, next slide, please. And others engaged in the exhibition with care and they sought out opportunities to speak about their experience of being in the space, either by conversing with others or by contributing to it in the many ways that the exhibition enabled. So as you all have mentioned before, it was a very interactive exhibition, and the design itself made people feel like they were a part of the conversation. So the posters were not just displayed, but the exhibition asked visitors to express what the posters made them think and feel. Next slide, please. So in Gallery 2, the designers placed a post box for collecting visitors' comments. The gallery presented a collective history of events significant to women's movements in India in a chronological format. Visitors were asked to pause and reflect on what they had read so far and add to this collective history of women. So one of the first things that I did every day the exhibition was on was go and open the post box and see if visitors had left any new notes. This was incredibly exciting to me. So people wrote about issues that the exhibition could address, things that they found significant, people and organizations that Zubaan could partner with, their feelings, seeing the posters displayed in this way, messages of hope and encouragement, and things that Archila should do. So next slide, please. On the way to Gallery 3, in the stairwell were placed 4 mesh frames labeled Rage, Despair, Hope, and Resistance. So visitors were instructed to tie red thread on the frame corresponding to the emotion that the exhibition had evoked for them. Next slide, please. The mesh thread display became something that we had not imagined initially. Some people were either hopeful or angry or in despair or ready to fight back, but others were angry, sad, hopeful, and ready to resist all at the same time. And they tied threads joining each of the separate panels, showing in a way how women's movements were sustained by all of these emotions. Next slide, please. Gallery 3 echoed Gallery 1 in many ways. Aditi had explained to me that while visitors stood outside the mesh structure, and Aditi is the founder of Studio Ferment who designed the exhibition. So while visitors stood outside the mesh structure in Gallery 1, looking at the display and reading what others had written, Gallery 3 was designed to draw them into the storytelling process. Thus, the single bulb of Gallery 1 grew into a canopy of lights in Gallery 3. Mesh panels were placed on the wall in Gallery 3, making visitors feel like they were inside the mesh structure they saw at Gallery 1, and they were invited to speak from within. Pen and paper was provided so that visitors could write notes and hang them up with the bulbs. So I was very surprised at the personal stories and experiences that people shared in the central display in Gallery 3. People wrote their hearts out like no one was watching. Next slide, please. So someone wrote about the pressure they faced from their family and how they moved on from it. Someone else wrote about things that they could tell no one, about being queer and not being able to reveal it. People wrote about connections they made with the posters that had been displayed, experiences of violence, of unacceptance, of deviation, of freedom, about running away, about someone who had not been there when they were needed. These people not only wrote about themselves, but they contributed to an archive of experiences available for visitors to see and read that proved that they were there to share other people's burdens, to listen to their stories, and to create a dialogue with those who had said something but received no response. Reading the responses recently, quite a while after the exhibition was over, I started to think, who were these notes addressed to? Some wrote to anyone who was reading, some to the creators of the archive and the exhibition. Some people wrote to their mothers, to their families. Some wrote messages of hope to someone in pain who was yearning to let go of whatever was holding them back. Next slide, please. A group of children who live nearby visited the exhibition often. They really enjoyed the opportunity to contribute something to the display. They spent many evenings at Gallery 3 drawing and coloring in the provided cards. The black pens that we had provided did not suffice. They asked for pencils, colors, eraser, scale, sharpener, and they made colorful drawings and they hung them up with the bulbs. So one day I was downstairs and I heard some commotion coming from the first floor. So I reached Gallery 3 to find that they were using the cushions that people were sitting on to slide round and round the central display. So another day, I walked around the exhibition with the children and I showed them specific posters and I was explaining what they were talking about. So one of the children, on seeing the posters that depicted problems faced by women within the domestic space, remarked, "Ha, emni to hoy." Yes, this is what happens. They drew on the cards and went home as usual that day. Next slide, please. Later, I noticed the central display and saw that they had recreated some of the posters that they saw. They drew Toro Bandhan Toro, break the shackles, and they wrote Log toot jate hai ek ghar banane mein. So people break building houses, and peace zone, no violence in the home. So, of course, there were people for whom the exhibition was depressing, about women's experiences and thus not their problem, and people who thought that this was not real art. So you all might remember that a note that we received in our post box read, "This exhibition is like fake because no real art is presented here." So this made me think, what was real art for this person? Next slide, please. Is real art an oxymoron? Perhaps something that could be consumed without thinking too much about it? Perhaps something removed from history and looked at from a distance? Perhaps something that would not look back at the onlooker and not reflect what they were? Perhaps something so not so overtly political? Next slide, please. But the experiences of the visitors demonstrated that the Poster Women exhibition was not something that you could just look at. The posters and the Poster Women archive encouraged onlookers to speak up, to start a conversation about their experiences with all the visitors who had visited and said something about what they had seen. And judging from the volume of responses that we received, it seemed like people had been silent for a while. And encouraged by the exhibition, they suddenly realized that they had a lot to say.
This is beautiful, Rini. I mean, and thank you for putting these together. It just gives anybody a sense of this space, those who might not have been there. So, I mean, thank you for that beautiful presentation and for all the thoughts. It has really been very, very interesting to, hear of the kind of emotions that a space like this triggers in people. And I like, some of the messages that they left behind, some of it so hopeful, some of it, just sharing how heartbreaking it is to might be going through any of any very personal turmoil that they cannot share with somebody else, and a space like this just offering it to anybody who would be willing to listen and stand in and spend a moment there. um Before coming to the last bit, just a quick question for you. I mean, this is what you have presented, shared about, being an observer, how you've seen others interact with this space. So just a couple of lines, thoughts on what your sense of this space was like. What did you feel?
I was like really proud of being the person introducing people to this space, like so even if someone was just coming outside, I was like, oh, you have to come inside and see what's inside. And like, there's this Poster Women archive, and this is an exhibition of some of the posters. So I was really, really, really happy, and like, it felt amazing to really be that person. Um, and also, like, it was so good. Of course, like, I took a walk around the exhibit every day, because like it was winter, and like, the stuff that we used to put the posters up, like often it dried and the posters fell down. So I was just, putting it up, and like, it's as if I'm like petting the posters, and it was a kind of a like loving person who was there, who I was, taking care of. So that was like really that felt very nice to do every day. But also, like, the people I met, like all of you who visited, all the feminists, my Kavita Di, who's been my professor, Urvashi ma'am, like everyone, all of y'all, Vidyun, just all of y'all visiting, and all the events that were held in conjunction with the exhibition. Um, just being being able to meet all of you, from Studio Ferment, from Zuban, that also was just really, really enriching, and I just feel very lucky to have been there at that time. And seeing how a part of this archive is growing, or other things are getting added to it, and also now getting to know of its history, and not now, just also during the exhibition, getting to know of its history, and getting to know people who've been part of it and contributing to it, meeting some of the artists whose work was in the exhibition. All of that has been just so beautiful. And like, I hope I can go to another Poster Women exhibition and do the same thing, this time as an audience member. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Rini. Thank you so much for that point. And we are definitely going to share about you petting the posters. I think that is a very, very sweet point to think of, and talks of one's, engagement every morning with a space like this. So I think, overall, from all the thoughts that all of you have shared, there were moments of, history, hope, despair, political standpoints, complex questions of, who is getting represented, who are we still leaving out, and also with the evolving space of the archive, I think the openness of it is something that is, so beautiful, because it gives a message to everybody. It started as a collaborative space. It is a history of everyone. And like, Aanchal also shared, it is something that one keeps adding on to. And even the exhibition spaces, open up this for all who are visiting, they to be leaving behind what they think needs to become a part of this space. So this is something that belongs to all. From that point, just with a it is very intriguing, how such a space affects each and all very differently but very deeply. Just a small story, and I was when I was there at the Shantiniketan exhibition, there was somebody visiting, and I heard her, say she was overwhelmed with, the entire space, and she shared a complete disbelief. She shared a disbelief at her own thought, when she saw the poster on leisure. we can, have it up for a bit. And she shared that, while I am going through everything, all of this feels very normalized, the stories of violence, torment, silence, but a woman up sitting there with her feet up, relaxing, is leaves a kind of thing. And she's like, I'm questioning my own hegemonically conditioned understanding on why I'm like, ye yahan pe kya kar raha hai? Like, what is this out of place thing? And she carried home, her thoughts on this particular poster. So I just want to take one moment to come to each of you on whether there is one or a group of posters, that you really, really personally connect with, have a story around, or want to talk about. So yeah, around the room, Manjima, maybe we can go back to you.
Thank you. I just want to say that it has been amazing to listen to Rini and Aanchal. Like, I visited the exhibition on the first day, in sort of inaugurate. It was just the beginning of the exhibition, and to sort of just hear what all has happened has been quite incredible. So yeah, that's been amazing. I think mine is okay. My favorite poster is that one. Yeah, it's a very powerful expression of solidarity. And I think that is the biggest story that always stays with me, Ek aur ek 11, 1 plus 1 is 11. And there's I think I've said this before at the exhibition itself, but there's so much power in remembering our struggles, whether it was individual or collective, and sort of recalling how far we have come. You know, I feel it helps us hope in times that, when the backlash feels very overwhelming and like quite insurmountable. So this for me, the exhibition and the posters really are really a reminder of how far we've come, what struggle leads to, and it helps, I think, just even hearing Achal and Rini and you talk about continuing the process and the process that it is, makes me think that, okay, we are nurturing and we are renewing our dreams, for a feminist future in a certain way. So I think that is what really stays in.
Thank you so much, Manjima. This was a poster by, I think we've not mentioned it here.
It's by Kamla Vasim.
Lavasin poster. And Achal, whose is the leisure one? The one we just...
That is from Asmita Group. Yeah.
So yeah, we've not mentioned these here, but all credits due where they are to each of these beautiful pieces being put together. Achal, so what about your favorite one?
So before going to my favorite, I would just like to show a glimpse, a slice of the, of the archive. So, these are not even all, these are most of the, themes that the posters are centered around, with, of course, Manjima's poster as, as the showstopper here. But we we have posters on several of these themes like anti-dowry, anti-rape, sexual harassment, health, trafficking, political participation, literacy, environment, marginal identities, religion, communalism, women's rights, and statement of strength. And you can see some of the posters. These are on dowry violence. These are on, sex determination and sex selection. These are on violence again. These are on custodial violence and by the way, all of these posters, I'm moving through them really fast, and these are sometimes text heavy, sometimes visual heavy, but all of these can be accessed at posterwomen.org with their annotations, with their provenance, and you know, uh, there are, of course, a lot of regional, engagement also that we do. And the website itself is also expanding. Our social media also has a lot of these posters, which also we are trying to, use to do as much engagement as possible. So all of this can be accessed there. Some posters on collectivization and solidarity, and this is on literacy. some posters on again literacy and discrimination against women. These are on some of the commissions, and these are also on solidarity. And I mean, I love this. I love the bird poster. And now I'll come to my favorite poster. And okay, so I'll just show it. So this one is actually my favorite poster. And when you talked about the leisure poster, Manjima, I think that when you think about posters from women's movement or feminist posters, you think of a lot of like violence. You think of those visuals, those imagery of violence, and you probably almost assume that that is how the poster would be. But then sometimes there is a break in that, and then, there is also posters of hope, posters of resilience, right? Posters of joy, posters of living together, posters of doing work together, solidarity, doing this feminist work together for ourselves and for all of us. So leisure poster also I see as that, and this poster also, it's called Shanti Sthal, uh, or a peaceful home. And it just says Parivarik Hinsa Guna hai. So domestic violence is a crime here. So, it's just a beautiful house, and the sun is shining above, and you know that इस घर में domestic violence नहीं होगी. There'll be no domestic violence at this house. So it's just so close to my heart, because I don't even have to explain this poster to anyone. Everyone has a smile on their face when they see this one. So yeah, that's where I would like to end it.
Thank you, Aanchal. Rini, about yours?
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed the cloth tapestries that were displayed in the exhibition at Shantiniketan. And all just the fact that they used a different modality, and I really like fabric and like fabric associated things, so just a personal choice. But I really it seemed like all of these posters maybe, or I think I heard you all talking about how these were made collectively and how a group of women were making this together. So that itself is interesting. And they're also using traditional forms which have been handed down through generations. So just seeing those forms used in this way to say something was just really interesting as well. So specifically, I want to draw your attention to the poster on the top right, the colorful one. So we named it Sultana's Dream because when initially when we were putting up the posters and Aditi had come, and we were all looking at this wall and admiring everything. And then so she's noticed that all she said that, so this is a world without men, it's just women. And I'm like, oh wow, you're right, it's Sultana's dream. And then she's like, oh well, and she asked me about the story. And then I told her Rokeya Shekhawat Hussain, I think, right? Begum Rokeya. So she had written this short story about a world where women are doing things and men are in the homes. Um, and and it's a futuristic world. So that's how the poster came to be named Sultana's Dream in my head. And during the opening, so Kavita Di had come, and Kavita Di was my teacher in Jadavpur in the comparative literature department, and she taught me feminism. Like I took her classes, and that's how I got to know all of this. And when everyone was going through and looking at these posters, she saw that, and then I told her that Aditi had talked about this as a world without men, and she's like, "Oh, hey, Sultana's Dream." I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly it." And so it was so nice to have that, her thinking the same thing as I had also, that the poster had evoked for me. So it's just that story which really made me connect to this poster, but also the way that people have made it, like the composition and the details that it has, the colors, just aesthetically is just something really really beautiful to look at. And also, as Achal said, it's also people working together. There's a message of hope in it. People are having fun, they're doing things. all together. There are animals, and birds. There are women. So it's just a world which seems happy. So that also really resonated with me.
It's just so beautiful, all of your stories, and I think it's been just amusing listening to all of you sharing, your experiences and also your stories in as a part of this journey. And I think what, through the posters and a little bit of the snippets that we could show, I think, you're all leaving with the audience, a world that they can visit and, look into, because there is like, I think, enough evidence through the discussions held today. There's a story behind each little thing that has been put together. There's so much out there. So hope people will be able to find the stories behind these posters and look into the archive and let us know of any thoughts that they have that should be included, other parts that are missing from this archive that should be showing here and building on, adding on to the stories. But thank you so much to all you wonderful panelists for sharing your thoughts and insights. And thank you to Ananke for giving us the space and letting us bring the poster women alive yet again once more in this hour. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Manjima, for really
Thank
good.
you, Manjima. Yeah.
And thank you, all of you. And thank you, Sabin. And thank you, Ananke team, for calling us.
Yeah, thank you. It was such a great experience talking to all of you.
Mm.
Thank you so much.